Hi, everyone. This is a quick statement I just wanted to make. I've been working on a video for a very long time, or actually many videos, having to do with a lot of world important topics and everything, but I kind of ran out of time for this one, so I really wanted to get this out, or at least this kind of statement, a smaller version of the statement, out before anything goes on. Tomorrow, Itzhak Herzog will be Itzhak Herzog. That's it. Will be going to see President Biden. Who is he? Nah, President Biden. No. Who is Itzhak? He is the president of Israel, and in just a few days or so, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, will be voting to try to make their Supreme Court easily overridable. Essentially, any choice that the Supreme Court makes, they can try to, well, say, no, we don't like that, and vote to reject it. Now, obviously, that is not normally a practice. I mean, duh. Most times, Supreme Court decides how to interpret law, and then the actual Knesset is, or the parliament or version, like a parliament, like a Senate or a House or something like that, chooses what laws to actually put in place. So they kind of are checks and balances on one another. But because Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has been dealing with the possibility of dealing with criminal charges. He is already dealing with criminal charges right now for having gotten his wife special favors while prime minister. He'd been the prime minister for 14 years or so. And then he had like a few months off just recently, and then he got voted back in. But yeah, he got his wife special favors, and he also worked with the local news organizations, I believe, to get special treatment with his own, to make sure that he wasn't criticized as much. And that is extremely concerning. So obviously it makes a lot of sense why he's trying to make it so that Supreme Court, who has already ruled in situations like when it comes to Palestine and Israel, the Israeli Supreme Court, I didn't know this until now, actually ruled that the settlements in the West Bank are legal. And yet the Israeli government had not done anything about it, and has continued to create more settlements in the West Bank, which is insane to me, that they're just kind of completely pushing against their own Supreme Court to the point where they're now going to vote to make it so that the Supreme Court literally is just overreachable. I mean, it is understandable to criticize Supreme Court, and honestly, I think it's perfectly reasonable to try to vote for reforms when it comes to the Supreme Court. I'd say when it comes to the amount of time justices are on the Supreme Court, or how much power the Supreme Court has over how people are meant to interpret law, how they're meant to interpret the law, where that stops, that like what kind of laws they're allowed to interpret, what kind of laws they aren't allowed to interpret. Like, there are open conversations to be had, but they're just deciding, no, we're just going to completely delegitimize the entire Supreme Court. And another reason why they are excited about possibly doing this is, well, they have the opportunity to go full steam ahead with Israeli settlements to get back into power after the, 6 months to a year or so, maybe a year and a half, that Netanyahu was out of power, out of being the prime minister. Netanyahu had to work with and create a group together with the most extreme right-leaning alt-right party, essentially, people in the Israeli government, which means that full steam ahead on the racism. Yeah, It is horrible. He's given a lot of power to a person named Itmar Ben Gvir, who is legitimately basically the guy who Itmar Ben Gvir he is legitimately a guy who like looked up to and had a poster on his wall of his room of an extremist who went and like killed and murdered Palestinian or Muslims or something like that. And just a really racist guy. Netanyahu has given him power to be able to choose how to treat choose how to treat Palestinians, and it is ridiculous. It's like giving a KKK control, like inspired KKK person, someone who's always wanted to be part of that extremist group, racist group at that, giving them control over all majority African American communities in the United States. It's just, it's such an insane leap. It doesn't make sense. It's morally disgusting to me. And on top of all of this, this full steam ahead method of throwing people out of their homes in Palestinian regions and continuing settlements has enabled more people thrown out of a town called Jenin, which is one of the biggest towns in the West Bank, the area that the settlements are still going on. The Gaza Strip, on the other hand, is a different area run by a slightly different government. They are being controlled by the military around the border in many different ways, including the border. Israel controls the internet access, the water access, the food access, the ability for people to go in and out. That's a whole different thing. But in the West Bank, that country has a whole different issue where Israel has just been continuously stepping in and taking over more and more land illegally by even their own Supreme Court's words, and some of their own politicians' beliefs is that it's illegal, but oh well. There's no way to really stop them, it seems, because the international community isn't willing to do anything about it. And the United States, one of Israel's biggest allies, is not willing to give the Israeli government or IDF any consequences for it, which is horrific in my opinion. So just to put into perspective, the people being thrown out of Jenin right now are now added to the at least 700,000 people who have been thrown out of Palestine since Israel's creation. Not to say that Israel's creation is this evil thing or anything. I'm not trying to justify or argue that. I'm just simply trying to point out that there are consequences to all of this, both good and bad. Israel was able to create a lot of incredible things and still has created a lot of incredible things. A lot of incredible people have come from Israel. Amazing perspectives and differing ideologies, a safe place for some Jews to be able to find a safety while being thrown out of places, Arab countries in the Middle East in the past 30-40 years. Israel's been their only safe haven in some scenarios. So I don't want to dismiss the good that Israel has done, but it shouldn't be on the backs of hurting another community and forcing that other community, the Palestinians, to go through the diaspora that us Jews have been living through for 1,000 years or so. It's just so sad. I mean, I'm still a diaspora Jew. Most of my family is not connected to Israel at all. And yet I still feel extremely sad about all of this, because it feels like we're just creating. I know I'm not personally responsible, but I still feel personally. I know it's not right for me to feel personally responsible because I have no connection to Israel, but I still feel the need to speak up about this, and I still feel like it's not right to follow Judaism and act in this way due to Jewish beliefs. In my opinion, Jewish beliefs are completely antithetical to that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Completely opposite, in my opinion. And then on top of all of that, the racist practices that are built into Israeli society alone, not allowing Arabic to be on, or not requiring Arabic to be on street signs alongside Hebrew, not allowing interfaith marriages, marriages between different groups of people, unless you get married outside of the country and then come back in. It just doesn't seem right to me. There's so many things that are, in my opinion, a little bit backwards. As a critique of the government, I should be very clear about this, as a critique of that country's practices, certain ideals, not as a critique of the fact that it is a Jewish country. I think a lot of people get stuck into this, like, let's criticize the Jews, but that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily help, and it actually ends up making the argument worse, because it gives excuses to certain people to argue that all people criticizing Israel are anti-Semitic. That's not true. A lot of people criticizing Israel are not anti-Semitic, but they can add to anti-Semitic belief systems and hate if they are not careful with their wording. Why is that important in comparison to a all lives matter, Black Lives Matter thing? Because both groups are discriminated against in this situation.
Hey there, future me. I just wanted to give a quick addendum because I feel like I could have explained this better. So what I mean to say here is, why is it important to criticize the Israeli government but not Jews as a whole for the problems in Israel, but it's perfectly fine to criticize white U.S. citizens for discrimination in the United States and not always have to specify that it's not all white people who are purposely discriminatory? Because I do believe it's okay to say that white people are the problem in the United States, even if I know that not all white people are purposely racist. I don't think it's necessary for people to say that out loud, whereas I do think it's okay, or actually necessary, to specify that not all Jews are part of the problems in Israel. Why is that? It's because, one, racist white U.S. citizens are still U.S. white citizens. Blaming all white people in the U.S. for discrimination is the equivalent of telling people that they need to try to solve the discriminatory issues in their own community. However, a sizable amount of Jews are not Israeli, which means they're not part of the Israeli community. They're not Israeli citizens. So blaming Jews as a whole for Israel's actions would be telling all Jews as a whole that they need to solve a problem that many are not at all part of, not part of that community, not part of being Israeli citizens, therefore giving Jews the blame for something that, again, they're not even part of. On top of that, sadly, many use this argument of blaming Jews as a whole for things, specifically when it comes to this, but also many other examples. Blaming Jews as a whole for a big problem is a huge practice that has ended up with many times Jews being discriminated against, hurt, abused, and sadly even killed, which is thankfully something that white people never have to deal with, but also shows the privilege that white people possess. So therefore, due to the danger Jews face, mainly due to that kind of misunderstanding of blaming all Jews for Israel's practices, that being such an easy excuse for racists and extremists to be able to use to hurt Jews as a whole, due to the possibility that, and probability, sadly, that many Jews do get hurt due to this stuff, it's extremely important to specify who you're criticizing when you're talking about Israel. It's not 100% necessary, because some people may understandably be burnt out on respectability politics, you could say, and not necessarily want to communicate perfectly when fighting for basic human rights. But the consequence is that discriminated against groups get hurt more if someone doesn't specify the wording in this particular kind of situation. And it's kind of antithetical to trying to fight for basic human rights, I feel like, if you're willing to put a group through more discrimination. That's what I'm trying to point out. I just wanted to make that specification because a lot of people make the comparison and say, well, why can't I just say all Jews, or why can't I just say the word Jews as a whole when criticizing Israel? This is a description as to why.
Israel is a government that is acting extremely hurtfully, in my opinion, to a obscene and abusive degree. Israel's government, specifically under Netanyahu and the IDF, those practices just genuinely boggle my mind. As for the people, very different story. There are politicians in Israel who genuinely disagree with this stuff. There are Israeli human rights groups who fight against how Palestinians are treated. There are Palestinian human rights groups who fight alongside and fight for both Palestinian human rights and Israeli human rights. So there must be, in my opinion, a way for this to come out into a safe scenario. Peace must be achieved when it comes to this, and I believe a two-state solution is almost necessary. Is it nearly impossible? Yeah, but is it necessary? Absolutely. So all in all, I just want to say I'm just disgusted. There's too much at stake for people to be acting so recklessly and hurtfully. I just can't get by the idea that it's right to allow governments like governments like Netanyahu's government to act in such a horrific manner. And I just wanted to state that, call that out, give a example of how to do that without adding to hatred against Jews across the world. Give an example of how to criticize Israel without subsequently unintentionally hurting Palestinians around the world, and just calling for peace. That's what I'm really trying to do. I can't get by any of it. The final thing, which is another side thing that has little to do with all of this, is just because of Israel's practices, I am now in more danger personally. Many people sadly think that criticizing Jews is blaming just individual Jews out there, or beating up individual Jews or killing them, is somehow going to help save Palestinians, which is literally the opposite. And it hurts my very soul to see that occurring, because hurting people like that, it literally adds opposite to the cause that you're fighting for. The fight for Palestinian human rights has been pushed back constantly due to people's arguments that the people fighting for Palestinian human rights don't really care about Palestinians. They only care about hurting Jews. If you can prove that that is not true, then you will get a hell of a lot more people to fight on your side and actual human rights toward Palestinians quicker. That is absolutely necessary. We need to make sure that human rights are achieved on both sides of that group and both sides of that situation, but especially for Palestinians, because they are in the most danger. Their houses are being taken. Their food is scarce. Their ability to hold economic wealth is basically completely cut off, and it is extremely terrifying to see the situations they're going through. Not to dismiss the fact that there are extremist groups in Palestine who are horrifying, racist, anti-Semitic, disgusting groups that I do not justify in any form or fashion. Genuinely don't. I understand why an extremist group is created in any situation, and it is not okay to hurt people in the name of peace. It does not help on any side in any situation. It only creates opposition. If you genuinely feel it is worth being extremist, then you are only every step of the way creating more support for your opposition. In the cases of something like the civil rights movement in the United States, historians have been able to argue that MLK was a very reasonable man, even if he wasn't seen that way at the time, and therefore normalized civil rights in a far more full fashion, because there was a more extreme alternative and Malcolm X, whether or not he was extremist, you could go back and forth on that. But I understand why a group seen as more extreme can be beneficial to fighting for human rights, even if it doesn't justify people being hurt in the process. So I see why a lot of people do that, but it still doesn't justify hurting people. That's just the concern for me. So that doesn't, however, the fact that there are extremist groups in Palestine does not represent the majority of Palestinians, and most certainly does not delegitimize their absolute need and right to live happy, decent, safe lives with all the human rights that are deserved by anybody and everybody, afforded them equally. That's what I have to say. Israel, under Netanyahu's rule, has a lot of horrible things up ahead, and I do not support any of it. I'm disgusted, and I pray for the day where I can genuinely feel proud of what Israel is and where Palestine is. But right now I can't. I just can't. And I know that I'm personally in more danger, and more importantly, Palestinians and Israelis, but especially Palestinians, are in far more danger because of these practices. It is all politics, and it is easy for them to fix if they just take the time to do it. Instead, it seems they're far more focused on lengthening the problem. Specifically, when I say they, I mean the leadership of Israel and the leadership in Palestine, but especially the leadership in Israel. And by Palestine, I mean two different leaderships: Hamas in the Gaza Strip, I believe, and the name eludes me, the group in the West Bank, Fatah, I believe. Yeah. All in all, thank you. I'm just disgusted. I hope for peace. I had to say that so I could get it out there. And thanks for listening. And as always, as I always say, and as always, peace.